We're going to begin with a deadly attack on U.S. troops in the Middle East, and the U.S. is vowing to hit back. A drone attack struck an American military outpost in Jordan near the border with Syria yesterday. 3 American soldiers were killed. Nearly 3 dozen others were injured. President Biden says an Iran-backed militia is to blame here. And he said, quote, "We shall respond." Ed O'Keefe is at the White House with the latest. Ed, good morning.
Gayle, good morning. The attack comes as tensions between the U.S. and Iranian-backed proxy militias are on the rise, and it runs the risk of causing Israel's war with Hamas to erupt into a broader regional conflict. U.S. officials say the troops at that outpost in Jordan had little warning of the incoming drone.
The attack came before sunrise early Sunday at an American base in northeast Jordan. CBS News has learned those injured and killed were in sleeping quarters when the armed drone struck. The outpost, known as Tower 22, supports U.S. Special Forces operating inside Syria, where they're under constant threat of attack. President Biden, campaigning in South Carolina on Sunday, blamed Iranian-backed militias and vowed to retaliate.
We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases, and we shall respond.
Samantha Vinograd is a former counterterrorism official in the Biden administration.
It is critical that the administration respond quickly and responsibly. But that means thinking about how their actions will be interpreted and carefully reviewing targets so that Iran doesn't overreact and seek to harm more Americans.
American forces have been operating in Syria and Jordan as part of an ongoing mission to root out ISIS. Thousands of troops have been stationed across Iraq ever since the end of the war there. Since the Hamas invasion of Israel in October, U.S. military sites in Iraq and Syria have been attacked more than 160 times. Sunday's deadly attack sparked bipartisan condemnation and swift Republican calls to directly attack Iran now.
Rushing to action in a moment like this would be extremely dangerous.
The Pentagon has yet to identify the dead or their military units pending family notifications. Injuries could increase in the coming hours or days. And this is the largest loss of life for the U.S. military to enemy action since the fall of Afghanistan. Tony?
All right, Ed, thank you very much. For more on what happens next, we're joined by John Kirby, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications. Admiral Kirby, thank you very much for being here. We'll talk about the U.S. response and deterrence, failed deterrence, in just a moment. But first, let's talk what happened. It's been described as a pre-dawn attack on our soldiers as they slept there in Jordan. What else do you know?
Well, we think this was a single drone attack. Again, we're trying to get more information right now, but it looks like it was a single drone attack. It hit a barracks facility where there were troops inside, and given the hour, most likely many of them, if not all of them, were in their beds. We're making sure we're getting the medical care that they need, particularly for those that need to be evacuated off-site. But we're also standing by for the potential numbers of injuries to go up. For instance, if some of them experience concussive symptoms, which would suggest maybe traumatic brain injury. And most importantly, we have to remember there are 3 American families that got the worst possible news over the weekend. And we got to make sure that they and their loved ones, the loved ones of those who were killed, those 3, know that they're going to get all the support that they need.
You know, Admiral, we've got 3 dead soldiers this morning. We've got 2 dead Navy SEALs on a mission in the region because of the conflict. We got an Army pilot in a coma, dozens injured, and more than 160 attacks on American forces there in the region. What do we need to do to make this stop?
We need to continue to make sure that we have, first and foremost, the force posture in place in the region, the military capabilities to defend our troops and our facilities, and to make it clear that these attacks are not acceptable. The president has added force capability to the Middle East. I don't have any force posture changes to announce today, but I can assure you that he'll make the decisions as commander-in-chief as appropriate to make sure we can continue to defend ourselves.
I want to follow up on this question of Iran and Iran-backed. There's no confusion from the White House's point of view about who is ultimately responsible for this, and that is the country of Iran. They're not hitting proxies of ours. They're hitting us. Are we going to hit them at last?
Again, I'm simply not going to get ahead of the president's decision space. We're not looking for a war with Iran. We're not looking for a conflict broader in the region. We're doing everything we can to try to take the tensions down. We will make the right decisions, the appropriate decisions to defend ourselves, our troops, and our facilities. But again, that decision rests with the commander-in-chief, and I'm not going to get ahead of where he is.
Admiral, respectfully, I know we're not looking for a war with Iran, but with 3 dead soldiers this morning, are we not already in one?
I would tell you that we are certainly mindful of the destabilizing behavior and actions of Iran and the way they support these groups, these militia groups in Iraq and Syria, Hamas, Hezbollah, the maritime attacks that they're permitting by the Houthis. We're mindful of the destabilizing behavior and the influence that they have in the region. Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the president and what he might decide or might not decide. We are not interested in a broader conflict in the region. We're not looking for another war, but we absolutely will do what we have to do to protect ourselves.
Admiral Kirby, thank you very much. Our thoughts, as yours are with the families of those 3 fallen U.S. service members. Thank you very much this morning.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
We're going to begin with a very serious story because it's a dangerous moment in the Middle East as President Biden weighs a response to the deaths of those 3 U.S. service members at a U.S. outpost in Jordan. Now, they were killed in a drone strike. It's blamed on a militia linked to Iran. This morning, we're learning new details about those 3 Americans whose home base was in Georgia. Ed O'Keefe is following all of this at the White House. Ed, I keep thinking about those families who are in deep, deep pain this morning. Good morning to you.
Yeah, Gayle, we all are. Good morning. The president's balancing several different factors as we wait for some kind of decision from him. One, potentially giving far more prominence to militias who've targeted U.S. military forces across the Middle East since the Israel-Hamas war began. But another factor he has to consider, how a military response would play here at home.
23-year-old specialist Brianna Moffett, 24-year-old specialist Kennedy Sanders, and 46-year-old Sergeant William Rivers. The 3 Americans killed in Sunday's attack were all decorated Army reservists assigned to the 926th Engineer Brigade out of Fort Moore, Georgia. A U.S. official says the one-way drone used in the attack was Iranian-made, the same kind Iran has provided to Russia to aid in its invasion of Ukraine and to the militias it supports.
Iran continues to arm and equip these groups to launch these attacks.
Pentagon officials tell CBS News the explosive drone came in low and slow several minutes after a U.S. drone was returning from a mission in Syria. The base's air defense system had been temporarily taken offline to allow the American drone to land safely. There was little to no warning for the troops still in their sleeping quarters.
We will respond, and that response could be multi-leveled, come in stages, and be sustained over time.
President Biden huddled with top advisors Monday while it's still unclear whether the U.S. will directly target Iran.
We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime in a military way.
On Capitol Hill, some Republicans say the militias responsible should be hit with force.
These are the tentacles of Iran, and we need to hit the tentacles hard to send a message to Iran that the United States will not tolerate attacks on our troops.
While some Democrats are urging caution.
We are increasingly getting pulled into a wider and wider war in the Middle East, and I think we have to be extremely careful about what our next steps are.
Notably, the Secretary of State warned yesterday that the Middle East hasn't been in such a dangerous situation in at least 50 years. Those are comments resonating around the globe today. As for the president, we've still yet to hear more from him about the attack. And today, he's slated to keep a predominantly political schedule. He's flying to Florida for 2 big fundraisers for his re-election campaign. Nate?
I know we are concerned about the U.S.'s response, but I can't help but to feel for those families. Ed, thank you. There are multiple Iran-backed militant groups right now launching attacks in the Middle East. U.S. fighter jets have already been hitting back at Houthi rebels from Yemen, who have been going after ships in the Red Sea for months. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell is in Bahrain for 60 Minutes and was the only journalist given access to a secret U.S. operations center.
Where are we headed now? Vice Admiral Brad Cooper is the top naval officer in the Middle East.
It is the nerve center for U.S. Navy operations throughout the entire Middle East.
The 3-star admiral commands the more than 7,000 sailors and Marines who only arrived in the Red Sea in the past few months.
It's intense. They've been operating in this environment for about 2 months. It's the longest period that the United States Navy has operated in what we would call a WEZ, a weapons engagement zone, or under the umbrella of an adversary, on a consistent basis since World War II.
There's no daydreaming going on
There's
this
no
watch.
daydreaming.
The admiral told us every second counts once Houthi militants fire off missiles or drones from Yemen.
How much time is there between a Houthi launch and then it could reach a U.S. ship?
So at any given moment, there's about 75 seconds between when that missile launches and when it's going to hit something. If it's coming toward them, now just put yourself in the seat of the destroyer captain on that ship. He has about 9 to 15 seconds to make a decision that they're going to shoot that down.
The U.S. Navy has shot down 80 Houthi drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles.
What kind of damage would one of those anti-ship ballistic missiles do on a commercial ship?
Well, let's go right here. This is exactly what it looks like. So this happened 3 nights ago. This particular ship was much further away, outside of a defensive umbrella. The Houthis attacked it, and you can see in practical terms what the damage was. Enormous fires.
Admiral Cooper told us it's Iran that's providing the hardware and the intelligence so the Houthis can aim at the American military.
No one has ever used an anti-ship ballistic missile, certainly against commercial shipping, much less against U.S. Navy ships.
That's what makes this conflict unique.
It's very unique.
For CBS Mornings, Nora O'Donnell, Bahrain.
President Biden says he has a plan to respond to that drone attack by Iran-backed forces that killed 3 Americans in Jordan. Administration officials say it will likely involve multiple targets and actions over multiple days, all part of an effort to retaliate without escalating this conflict. Ed O'Keefe has more on the story from the White House.
Days after the drone attack that killed 3 Americans, President Biden says he's landed on a response.
Yes.
U.S. officials tell CBS News plans call for a strategic bombing campaign that's likely to continue for a number of days, striking numerous targets.
I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. That's not what I'm looking for.
Does Iran fear the U.S. about the possible escalation of military involvement in the Middle East? What do you say to those in your party?
We'll see.
In an apparent attempt to head off U.S. retaliation, the Iranian-backed militia the U.S. blames for the deadly attack in Jordan announced the suspension of military and security operations against American forces. But the Pentagon says there's been 3 more attacks on U.S. troops since Sunday's strike.
We have called on the Iranian proxy groups to stop their attacks. They have not. There will be consequences.
The U.S. military is rushing additional air defenses to the site of the attack in Jordan, an outpost officials acknowledged hadn't been as well protected against drone attacks as other American troop locations in Iraq and Syria. Sunday was the first time the outpost, known as Tower 22, had been attacked. On Tuesday, President Biden spoke by phone with the families of the 3 service members killed, including the parents of Kennedy Sanders.
Kennedy was full of life. She was a breath of fresh air.
The commander-in-chief told them Kennedy was promoted posthumously to the rank of sergeant.
I really know what that meant to her, because she was working towards, getting that promotion. And that was one of the most special moments in this whole encounter that, they come from the President of the United States.
The White House says the president plans to attend the formal return of the 3 service members killed, what's called a dignified transfer ceremony, on Friday at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Nate?
Ed, thank you.
The U.S. has positioned one of its most lethal and effective assets in the Red Sea. We went to see for ourselves, taking a C-2 Greyhound, also known as a COD, to the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier. The night we arrived on board the carrier, the destroyer, the USS Gravely, intercepted another Houthi missile.
We're on call 24/7. It never stops.
Rear Admiral Mark Miguez is the commander of Carrier Strike Group 2.
What's the first thing the president asks when there's a crisis? Where are the carrier strike groups? And there's a reason for that. You've seen some of it in full display over the last 8 hours.
We were there during night flight operations. Captain Christopher Hill was observing from the ship's bridge. We asked him about the attack on American service members in Jordan that killed 3 soldiers.
The president has said that he has made a decision about how to respond. Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
We have been ready for quite some time.
No matter what the order?
No matter what the order.
Do you think you'll end up being involved?
We are presently involved.
We flew by helicopter to see the ships heavily involved in deterring the Houthis and defending American warships, the destroyers.
We're on a Navy MH-60 helicopter right over the Red Sea, and we are heading to the USS Mason. That destroyer is the tip of the spear.
Once on board the Mason, we went inside the highly secretive Combat Information Center, where split-second decisions are made when the radar picks up an inbound threat.
Simply put, at any time, in any given place inside the Red Sea, I could be shot.
Commander Justin Smith says the USS Mason has been on high alert for incoming Houthi missiles and drones since it arrived in the region almost 90 days ago.
How long can you carry that on, that heightened level of posture?
No, this is demanding work, but our sailors have the tools, they have the resources, and we have the flexibility and logistics to be able to maintain this for a long period of time.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Nora O'Donnell with the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea.
Nora, thank you. Where Iran's president is responding for the first time to America's threats of retaliation after the deaths of 3 U.S. service members in Jordan. Those soldiers will be honored in a dignified transfer ceremony today, and President Biden plans to be there. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House this morning tracking all of it for us. Ed, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tony. Iran's president says it'll respond to anyone that bullies his country. And that solemn ceremony honoring those fallen American soldiers will be held this afternoon as the families are allowing it to be seen by the public.
Speaking Thursday at the National Prayer Breakfast, President Biden paid tribute to the 3 soldiers killed in the Jordan attack. Sergeants William Rivers, Kennedy Sanders, and Breonna Moffett.
They risked it all, and we'll never forget the sacrifices and service to our country, that the dozens of service members who were wounded and are recovering now.
As for the U.S. response to the attack,
it's time to take away even more capability than we've taken in the past.
U.S. officials tell CBS News that targets in Iraq and Syria have been approved, including against Iranian personnel and facilities in those countries. And Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, responded today, saying Iran won't start a war, but will respond strongly to anyone who bullies it. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says this time will be different from the retaliatory strikes launched in response to other recent attacks.
They have a lot of capability. I have a lot more.
Walking with a limp into the Pentagon briefing room, it was Austin's first meeting with reporters since his hospitalization in December. He also said he apologized directly to President Biden for keeping his fight with prostate cancer a secret.
We did not handle this right. I did not handle this right. I should have told the president about my cancer diagnosis. I should have also told my team and the American public. And I take full responsibility. I apologize to my teammates and to the American people.
As far as the status of Secretary Austin's health is concerned, he said he's still dealing with leg pain but is going to physical therapy, and that doctors are confident he will continue to improve. Tony.
You know, Ed, in other news tied to the region, President Biden issued this executive order yesterday sanctioning 4 Israelis. These are settlers, people who are living inside the lines of what could be a future Palestinian state, seen as an obstacle to peace. What's it all about?
Yeah, it means the U.S. can now sanction any settlers or anyone else who commits or threatens violence or destruction of property in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. In essence, it reiterates U.S. support for the so-called 2-state solution, or a separate Palestinian state. We should note the White House announced this new executive order on Thursday as the president was visiting swing state Michigan, home to a sizable population of Arab American and Muslim Americans upset with the president's continued support for the war that resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. Tony?
Show of seriousness as well as the U.S. tries to broker this peace deal. Ed, thank you very much.